Ryan, a fellow working mum. And if this is your first time here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Today, I want to start by saying something that might sound a little controversial. I don't think maternity leave is the hardest part of becoming a working mum. I think coming back is. Now, before anyone jumps into my DMs, just hear me out, because becoming a parent is huge. Pregnancy, birth, sleep deprivation, feeding, recovering physically and emotionally. And please, don't get me wrong, none of that is easy. But over the past few weeks, I've noticed something interesting in the media. There's been a lot of celebration around Australia's paid parental leave increasing to 26 weeks as of the 1st of July 2026. And honestly, I think it's fantastic. Trust me, I'm a big advocate and big supporter of this. And even now, hearing the Labor Party actually wanting to have policy of bringing it up to 52 weeks, which is one whole year, I think it's amazing and it's definitely progress, because families deserve way more support. It's also recognition that caring for a baby matters. But as I read an article and after article celebrating 6 months of leave, I kept on thinking, well, who's talking about day 131? Who's talking about that first Monday back at work? The first daycare drop-off where you cry in the car? The first meeting where someone says, "How was your holiday?" or "Remind us what you used to do." The first time your childcare centre calls because your baby has a temperature. The first performance review where you wonder, do people still see value in the work that I do? Or do I have leadership material? Because that's the part hardly anyone prepares women returning back in from maternity leave for. And if you've lived it, I know exactly what you mean. According to Services Australia, from 1 July this year, eligible families can now access 26 weeks of government-funded paid parental leave. And this is something worth celebrating. And it can also be taken by the mother and the father, but not equally and at the same time. So there are some caveats underneath that. But here's something I don't think that gets enough attention. Policies can certainly give you enough time and give you more time. They can't automatically give you more confidence. They can help you out a little bit financially, but remember, this is paid parental leave at the minimum wage, so you're not going to be making a huge amount of money as well. They can't stop you questioning whether you're still good at your job. Policies can't tell you how to navigate that feeling like you don't quite belong at work anymore, but also don't quite feel like the version of yourself that stayed at home either. Because returning to work isn't simply returning to work. It's rebuilding an identity, and they are two very different things. I remember thinking before I returned back to work, okay, once I get back, I'm going to feel like myself again. I'm going to be really excited to even just go to the toilet on my own and have a hot coffee. And maybe you've also thought that too, that somehow putting your work clothes back on, but that can also be a struggle because at times our bodies have also changed. Having adult conversations will magically switch your brain back into career mode. That's not what happened for me. Instead, I remember constantly feeling split between the two. I'd be in a meeting thinking, when do I need to pump yet next? Thinking about the daycare pickup, playing with my son whilst mentally also writing tomorrow's presentation. I'd be leaving work feeling guilty I hadn't done enough, but then I'd also be at home feeling guilty that I hadn't been present enough for my son. And I kept wondering, when does this get easier? And looking back now, I realize I wasn't failing. Instead, I was transitioning. And I wish someone had told me that, because transition feels messy. And so does that's where uplift and growth. It feels uncertain. It feels uncomfortable, because when we're going through growth, it is supposed to feel that way. So can we talk about something that almost every working mum also experiences, yet not many people say out loud? Walking back into work and suddenly feeling like the least experienced person in the room. Even though you've worked there for years, you second guess yourself, you hesitate before speaking, you wonder whether everyone else has moved on without you. You've got no idea maybe who the person is sitting next to you because they're new, unsure of what the company direction and structure is because there may have been a reorg and uncertainty. What is this thing called AI? What's ChatGPT? As a result, you over-prepare for meetings, you apologize more, you volunteer less. Sound familiar? Well, here's the thing. Nothing changed overnight about your capability, but everything changed about your confidence and the way you see yourself and your identity. And those are not the same things. One of the concepts I often talk about is matrescence. And if you've listened to this podcast before, you'll know how passionate I am about it. And I've done some amazing episodes. Because we spend so much time preparing women to how to care for a baby and asking what their birth plan is and which hospital they're going to. But we spend very little time preparing women for who they are becoming once they leave that hospital and are going to be instantly a mum. There's no guidebook. Matrescence is this developmental transition into motherhood. Just like adolescence, it changes who we are. Motherhood changes us too. Not because we've become weaker, but because we've become different. Different priorities, different perspectives, different responsibilities, different values, different capacity. The problem is most workplaces expect women to return as exactly as they left. But imagine asking someone who had lived overseas for a year or completed another degree or experienced a major life event to come back exactly the same. You wouldn't. So why do we expect that of mothers? There's another statistic that also really stood out to me recently. The Workplace Gender Equality Agency has reported that around 2/3 of Australian employers now offer some form of employer-funded paid parental leave in addition to the government scheme. It's great progress. But here's my question. How many organisations have structured return to work programs? How many managers are trained in supporting returning parents? And how many check in with the mother or father after 3 months instead of just day one? Because from what I hear, that real support is missing. And maybe you're listening to this thinking, Carina, that's exactly how I feel. And if that's you, I want you to hear this next part. Because I think it's one of the biggest mindset shifts you can make. You do not need to become the person you were before you had children. That version of you returning back into work doesn't exist anymore. That's okay. And it's also normal. You're not going backwards. In actual fact, you're going forwards. So if you're listening to this and thinking you don't need to become the person you were before children, you're building forwards, I really want you to sit with that for a moment. Because I think that is where so many working mums get stuck. We spend so much energy trying to get back to who we were, the ambitious version of ourselves, the version who could stay late at work, the version who could say yes to everything, the version who didn't have to check the childcare app before expecting a meeting, the version who didn't have to think about school holidays 6 months in advance. But maybe the goal isn't to go back. Maybe the goal is to recognize that motherhood has added another layer to who you were. That layer brings strengths. It brings perspectives. It brings resilience. It brings the ability to make decisions quickly with incomplete information, which, let's be honest, it's basically the job description of every working mum. One of the things I hear from women returning to work is, I don't feel like myself anymore. I used to be confident. Now I second guess everything. I used to put my hand up for opportunities. Now I worry I won't have the time. I don't know if I want the same career as I wanted before. I want to say something really important here. There is absolutely nothing wrong in asking any of those questions. In all honesty, I actually think it's a sign of growth. It shows that you're leveling up. Because becoming a mother often changes the questions we ask. Before children, maybe the question was, how far can I climb on the ladder? How much can I achieve? What opportunities can I chase? But after children, the questions might become, what actually matters to me? What kind of leader do I want to be? What kind of life do I want for my children? What does success look like? And what's most important? How do I want to show up as a mum? And those are not weaker questions. These are really deep questions that you probably need to sit with over a nice cup of tea or a glass of wine and a journal and really think about them. I think there's a narrative also that we need to challenge, that when women become mothers, they either A, go back to work and try to do exactly the same thing and continue climbing, or the perception that they lose ambition. But I don't think it's that black and white and that simple. For many women, ambition doesn't disappear. It just changed shape. Maybe you still want leadership. Maybe you still want meaningful work. Maybe you still also want financial independence. But you also want flexibility. You also, no doubt, want some boundaries. And you also might want to be present for school pickups. You also want to be that person that goes to assembly. And somehow we've created this idea that wanting both means that we're not fully committed to it. We're not fully committed to either. But why? Why do they have to be polar opposites? Why can't it be integrated in this nice Venn diagram about how we can be a mum and also work? Why can't success include both achievement and a life outside of work? Why does our success so often get rated on what we're doing at work as opposed to even what our family looks like and how we can be a mum and also have a career? I think one of the biggest mistakes we make when returning to work is expecting ourselves to perform 100% immediately. We forget that we are learning a new way of working. When you start a new role, you usually get onboarding, support, time to learn, someone checking in, space to ask questions. But when you return from parental leave, often the expectation is, welcome back, here's your laptop, here's your calendar, good luck. And then we're surprised women struggle. Returning to work after having a baby is not coming back from annual leave after 2 or 4 weeks. It's a major life transition, and it deserves to be treated this way. And so here are 3 things I want every working mum returning to work to remember. Number 1, you don't have to prove your commitment by being constantly available. I think this is one of the biggest traps for working mums, and I will put up my hand and say, I've done this and I still do this myself. We come back and think, I need to show everyone I'm still committed. So we overcompensate. We respond immediately to that email. We say yes to everything because we're scared of saying, if we say no, we're not going to be asked again. We don't take breaks. We avoid asking for flexibility because we're scared of no and then what the ramifications are. And we try to prove that we haven't changed and we're still the same person. But here's the thing. Your value isn't measured by how available you are. Your value is measured by the impact and the outcomes that you create. And I think this is something women need to hear more often. You can be deeply committed to your career and still have boundaries. You can care about your work and care about your family. Those things can coexist. Number 2, don't make career decisions from a place of exhaustion. This one is really important because that first year back can be really hard. You might be tired, you might be feeling overwhelmed, anxious, everything else, and still the hormones are going wild. You might wonder, is this career even worth it? But before you make a huge decision, ask yourself, am I unhappy with my career? Or am I exhausted because I'm just carrying too much? And those are very different problems. Sometimes the answer isn't leaving your career. Sometimes the answer is changing the support around you or maybe just the organisation, but not the career itself. And also having a different conversation with your manager. Sharing more of the mental load at home and also creating realistic expectations and getting that more support. Number 3, give yourself time to find your new rhythm. I remember when I returned to work after having my second child, I started working 3 days a week and for a while it worked. But then there was this moment when I realized I was doing work on my non-work days. I was answering emails, having meetings, and still mentally carrying the role. And I had this realization, if I'm doing 4 days of work, maybe I just need to acknowledge that and also get paid for it. But even then, the decision wasn't simple because increasing work days felt like I was taking something away from both of my children. There was the guilt. what I eventually realized was that the number of days I worked didn't determine whether I was a good mum. It was about the quality of time that we spent together mattered. The connection mattered. The relationship mattered. That hug, the good night routine, that's what my kids wanted. And that helped me make a decision that worked for our family at that point in time. Not someone else's family, not Instagram, and no one else's expectations. It was ours. So if you're thinking about returning back to work, or you're already back and questioning everything, instead of asking, how do I manage it all? I would like yourself to reframe this and ask, what support do I need to make this sustainable? And what does being a working mum look like for me? Because I think these are the questions that we don't ask enough. We assume the solutions are becoming better at juggling, better at organising, better at planning, and better at coping. But maybe the solution isn't becoming better at carrying everything. Maybe the solution is actually carrying less, dropping deliberately some of those balls. And what workplaces need to understand is that this conversation isn't just for mums, because the responsibility cannot sit entirely with women. Organisations have a role here too. The return to work shouldn't be viewed as, oh, you've just finished leave, welcome back. It should be viewed as a transition. Managers need to understand confidence may take time to rebuild. Priorities may have shifted. Flexibility needs to be normalised. And career conversations still need to happen. Just because you're a mum doesn't mean your career's over. One of the biggest risks for organisations is assuming that because someone returns part-time or needs flexibility, that they are less ambitious. And research consistently shows that the motherhood penalty is not linked to women's ability, but to the career interruptions and workplace barriers that often follow having children. The question organisations need to ask isn't how do we keep mums from leaving? It's how do we create workplaces where mums can continue to thrive? And we also want to retain those women as well. So today I want you to leave with this. Yes, let's celebrate 26 weeks of paid parental leave in Australia. And if you're in another country, advocate and celebrate the leave that you already have. Let's celebrate progress. Let's acknowledge that families all around the world deserve support. But also let's expand the conversation, because the hardest part isn't always the leave. It's the transitioning back. It's figuring out who you are now. It's rebuilding confidence. It's finding a way to have a career and have a family without feeling like you're constantly failing at one of them or all of them. And if you're currently in that season, if you're packing your daycare bags at 6 a.m., if you're sitting in your car before work wondering whether you can do this, and you're questioning whether you've lost the person that you used to be, I want you to remember, you haven't lost yourself. You've grown. The skills you've developed through motherhood aren't a distraction from your career. They are part of what you bring to it. They are strengths. You have so many soft skills in a world and an environment now that is craving and calling out for those, particularly in the world of AI. Your empathy, your resilience, your ability to prioritize, your ability to lead through uncertainty. Those things matter. And the workplace needs more people who understand those things. So take the pressure off yourself to have it all figured out. Give yourself permission to learn this new version of working motherhood. And remember, you don't have to choose between being a good mum and having a meaningful career. You get to define what success looks like for you and your family. I'll see you next time on the Working Mama podcast. And as always, I would really love if you could share this with a fellow working mum who you think might also need just this little reminder today. And I will see you next week. Have a great day.